Climate change is overwhelmingly referred to as scientific language, which puts up a barrier between interlocking scientific and social aspects of the issue. Environmental social movements in the past have been heavily based on scientific facts that focus on the preservation and the management of wilderness and the environment. However, there are many dimensions within climate change, and it is important for the world to take note of the social issues embedded deep within. The environmental justice movement has recently focused on sociological aspects, specifically the history of exploitation in regard to different social positions. It is too rare that we discuss the impacts of gender equality and its disproportionate effects on people's fate within climate change. We interviewed a number of people that did not have a focus in sociology or environmental studies to see where they stood in their belief and knowledge within gender and its connection to climate change.
No.
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 I don't know why gender would have anything to do with climate change, and so no.
I've not.
I definitely have. I think over time I've realized that the two topics are connected, definitely. I think very different genders, people in more marginalized communities are disproportionately affected. And so, yeah, when you have climate change issues, I think when you're more vulnerable in a more vulnerable community, you're definitely going to be disproportionately attacked by it.
Yes.
Maybe, but I don't know. Maybe not where I live.
Yes.
I guess I haven't really thought about it. I guess so.
I assume so.
Oh, absolutely not. Just because of like societal or systemic issues or influences, you might be kind of put into a situation or kind of born into a situation where you are in a community that's not as protected.
In many urban settings in developing countries, poor women are responsible for finding and obtaining water for their families. During droughts, there is a lack of rain and rivers dry up, which causes women to have a walk long distance to get to available water sources. This results in women having to bear a health cost, including spinal injuries, pelvic deformities, spontaneous abortions and miscarriages, and chronic fatigue. Women also lose out on possible income generating opportunities, forced to withdraw from school and miss out on education, and are vulnerable to sexual abuse and assault. I didn't really think about it in like affecting people in developing countries, especially women, because I guess they do the things for their families. So it does change my opinion a good amount about climate change and on women and gender equality, I guess.
In the Chicago heat wave in 1995, 50% of the deaths were among men. However, older women were more likely than male counterparts to be more vulnerable in a heat wave of this sort due to living alone, being more susceptible to cardiovascular and respiratory complications from heat exposure, as well as living on higher floors of apartments. So masculinity in general is kind of like not asking for help. So if everyone was like equally affected by this heat wave, women would be more likely to seek treatment or ask for help or like tell someone they were like either living with or a friend that they weren't feeling well.
The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies estimated that approximately 140,000 were killed in the cyclone, and 90% were women and children. They're like perceived as being the more like stronger ones or whatever, so that's why maybe more women and children are killed, because they're kind of left behind or whatever, not seen as being the more like dominant gender.
Yeah, because I guess I just thought about it being in the US, but not in different cultures.
Yes, I think that changed my opinion. but that also makes me question a lot of just other economic factors as well, rather than gender, so I don't know.
Yes, it does change my opinion. This makes me think more about, I think of it in like a society situation, which this is, but it's more like specific.
Yeah, it actually really did. I feel like I just like realized that gender can really impact your experience with climate change.
The correlation between gender and climate change is a discussion that does not take place enough. Vulnerability in climate disasters stems from marginalized groups and institutionalized inequalities. There are prominent examples in both the global north and south where climate change has unequal effects on gender. For men, the social construct of masculinity leads to a greater number of deaths in certain situations, such as the Chicago heat wave, in which they refuse to ask for help. In addition, wildfires pose a huge risk for men since firefighting is a male-dominated profession, due to it being a paramilitary command structure that encourages loyalty, courage, risk-taking, and danger. Women are faced with a number of factors that could affect their standing in climate change. The glass ceiling prevents women from being fairly represented within Congress and climate science. Women also are more likely to face sexual abuse after a climate disaster. Jobs created after disasters are male-favored, which economically hinders women from the job world. Women in developing countries were burdened during climate disasters due to restricting clothing and hair, duties in the home, not being able to swim, and poor nutrition. In addition, trans people have a higher rate of violence and abuse, as well as economic struggles and psychological distress, so placing the burdens of climate disasters leads to increasing gaps of inequality within climate change. While we focus our project specifically on gender, all social identities contribute to a person's situation in the face of climate change. Climate change is an environmental justice issue with an intersectional focus. Colonization is the root of gender disparities as well as the hierarchical standing, which ultimately leads to inequalities and unfair impacts to marginalized people.